This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 11, Episode 17. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by HK. Today is Thursday, May 22nd, as of the recording of this episode. And I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by co-host, Jacob Paulsen.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. And Riley is the guy who likes big dots, and he cannot lie.
That's right.
That's what it says on your shirt.
Yes, that's the truth. I like big dots.
Well, I mean, there's a time for big dots. There's a time for small dots.
Yes, that is true. If it's a pistol context, to me, the time is always big dots, but that's
Okay.
my preference for sure.
Right. Fair enough.
That's what's fun about a phrase like "I like big dots and I cannot lie" is that is my opinion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. Yeah, it's all good. You're allowed.
Jacob is the guy who is sitting here wearing a plaid shirt.
What, is there something wrong with this shirt?
Purple in color too.
Is there
it's
like
very nice. You just look so professiontle today.
All right.
I'm the one in shorts. And
you're the second person
t-shirt.
to say something, so I guess that means I'm normally not looking so nice. If a guy could put on jeans and get called out for looking nice that day, his normal day must look pretty bad.
Yeah. And I am not the guy sitting here drinking my urine. I know this water looks yellow in color, but it's just an electrolyte drink.
Glad to hear it.
I didn't know what color it would be until
My
I mixed
mind
it up.
did not go there, but I'm glad that you
mine
clarified.
did immediately. I mixed it up, and I was like, that does not look. I mean, I guess you could say it's lemonade, but it is definitely does not taste like lemonade.
All right.
It's supposed to be grape flavored. What's up with that?
Well, maybe they're trying to keep the red 40 and blue 20 or whatever out of your system.
Make America healthy again.
Yeah, something like that.
Today is our Justified Saves episode. I think it's actually been a while since we've had a Justified Saves episode. So we're glad to be with you. And we'll be highlighting a number of news stories from recent weeks, or maybe even, I think the oldest one might be a month and a half or two old. But these are really interesting stories. That's why they're featured here today. As typical, we typically, that's really redundant. We typically have what not to do stories. We'll highlight a few of those today that I think are interesting. Lessons to be learned from those, especially on the what not to do side of things. And then we'll talk about the better stories, or the things that went a little bit better for the folks involved in these defensive gun uses. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our sponsors. First one is CCW Safe, which is always our sponsor of a Justified Saves episode. So they're here today sponsoring this one. That is who we recommend that you consider checking out for self-defense legal coverage protection, for in case you have your own defensive gun use that you need to have legal representation for. And I'll tell you, any defensive gun use, no matter how justified you think you are, you want to have a legal team to back you up, to offer to you legal advice. One of the cool things about the way they do things, it may not be entirely unique to them, but I mean, earlier this year at SHOT Show, when I did an interview with their president, Kent Brown, you can go back and listen to that episode. I don't have the exact number handy right now, but you can go back and listen to that. It was interesting having him explain how they handle emergency calls that come in. And one of the things I like about the process of that, besides the fact that they have a really well-established redundant process to ensure somebody qualified will answer and take your call, but as quickly as possible, once they get some basic facts from you, they hand you off to an actual attorney, and they have several on their staff. And as soon as that happens, your call is privileged, meaning you are free to talk about whatever you need to talk about from that moment on, with a privileged conversation to get kind of next steps information and actual legal advice. They will not be the legal team that will actually represent you in a case if it gets that far, but they can represent you up front, right from the get-go, in the immediate aftermath of a self-defense situation. And of course, they're going to work quickly to then get you handed off to a qualified, experienced legal team that's probably more local to you, that can then kind of take things from that point forward. And they'll continue to be right there throughout the process, working with your then hired legal team as well, as much as is necessary. So I think that's just a worthwhile thing mentioning as we talk about them here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you're on that phone with that attorney, they got a handful of other people on that team waiting to hear if they need to board planes and head toward you to jump in and help start resolving things and gathering evidence. So it's a serious game.
Yeah, even so far as like in the most critical incidents, they will travel to where you are. And if for some reason you are arrested and thrown in the slammer, and bail is set, like their guys on the ground are going to go to bat for you to get you bailed out, to get that in place, so that you don't have to spend any more time than is necessary behind bars while legal proceedings move forward. So. Anyway, ccwsafe.com. Go sign up today. Our other sponsor today is KSG Armory, and we wanted to bring to your attention some new, not only gun models that are supported, but also new holsters. I don't know if maybe we did once.
I don't know.
But, we have a new holster model to mention specifically on this episode today, which is the Saratoga, which is named after the battle of Saratoga,
which is named after a place.
A place.
Yes,
Saratoga.
Saratoga. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Keeping in line
pivotal, critical battle in the American Revolutionary War.
Yep. Keeping in line with kind of our way, the
thematic,
the theme. There we go. Of so many of our holster products and lines at KSG Armory named after something, from the War of Independence or War for Independence. So. The Saratoga is specifically designed for revolvers. It's very similar to our Lexington holster, but we've got a number of Smith & Wesson J-frame and Taurus J-frame sized revolvers that are supported for that new Saratoga holster. And Jacob, maybe mention a couple of the newer. I know there's one that's like brand spanking new added to the gun model list on the Lexington side.
That's
maybe mention a few of the other newer models there.
Yeah, so in recent history, we've added support for several different staccatos. So that's if you've been holding out. In fact, that was probably the most requested thing we heard all the time. Was 2011. So check it out and see if we now support your staccato or your other 2011. Also, we've added support recently for the Taurus GX4 and GX4XL. So those are both supported guns. And I feel like I'm missing a couple more. I'm drawing a blank on. Oh, a couple of TISAs, the PX4.
Yes.
Yeah, that's imported and distributed by TISAs. So the PX4 is now supported.
There's the PX4. I think it's called the PX4 Duty. It's a full-size gun, and then the Compact, which is a little bit more compact. Those are actually really interesting guns. They seem pretty decent. I don't have a ton of experience, like live rounds going down range with them, but from what I've seen handling them, I like what I see, and they're very affordably priced. And
yes.
So those are supported as well.
Yep, and of course the new VP9s that have come out this year. So the VP9 A1 series, the VP9K, and the VP9L. No, K and what's the
F?
F. I struggle with the F because when I think F, I think of the Walther PDP F, which is not what HK is going for with their F.
Yeah, but anyway. HK is doing like what should have always been done, which is F means full size.
Right. Well, but don't assume these letters make sense or that they're in English.
I think they do in HK's,
yeah. K does not.
It comes from the word Kurz,
which is not English, to be clear.
Is German for short.
Right, but it's not English.
But it makes sense. I mean, they're made in Germany.
So what is full size in German?
I have
also
no idea
start
what
with
the
an
word
F?
for full.
That's my point. Is
you
don't assume anything. But yes, we support those, and of course the CC9 and the CC9 now we support with TLR7 sub, either the 1913 or the Hellcat, or whatever it's being called now, light. So yeah, lots of new things.
Did you mention the GX4?
Yes,
I may have fallen asleep for a moment there. You were you were delivering that boom. Well, maybe it was fast, but maybe it was just you were so boring I fell asleep for a second. Anyway,
No comment.
So, a bunch of new models supported for gun models, but also some new holster models at ksgarmory.com. Go check them out. Appreciate your support of sponsors. So, we're going to start right off the bat. Actually, I'm going to give you a little teaser here. Stay tuned for this one. This is quite a wild story. Fired construction worker opens fire with rifle at former job site, then shot in self-defense by armed coworker. So we're going to break that down and get into the details here in a little bit. You're going to want to stick around for that one. But first, let's go ahead and get into our what not to do stories. These generally, in most cases, these are instances where you have innocent parties involved. Someone is attacked or threatened, a home is broken into, whatever, and sometimes they make legal mistakes, meaning that their use of deadly force to defend themselves is not exactly up to snuff. Sometimes they make some tactical errors.
Yes.
And so that's what we like to highlight here. And that sometimes is true also in some of our remaining stories, although generally our remaining stories, we try to make those or ensure those ones are more of a truly justified nature. But anyway, so this first one here is out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, according to KOB Channel 4, I assume a local news affiliate there. Bystander shoots robbery suspect in the leg. This is interesting. Right from the get-go of the title, it's like, oh, wow, okay, somebody shot in the leg. I'd like to know more about that. Was that intentional? Was it not? Jacob, what's the rundown on this one?
Imagine you're at the drive-through at the credit union, waiting to get money out of the ATM or something like that. And, there's quite a few cars because people need money or like money or have money. And there's some whack job dude running around out in the drive-through haggling and hassling people to give him money. And he's just obnoxious as crap. I mean, he's driving everybody crazy. So as you're sitting there waiting, you see a couple of credit union employees come out who decide that they need to tell this guy to get lost because he's hassling their customers and this ain't good for business. So the two credit union employees approach the bad dude and chat with him, and he goes nutso further than he was already and punches one of them. So now you got a credit union employee who's been punched, and they're probably retreating. They're probably like, "Hey, I don't get paid for this." So they're back inside the credit union. And meanwhile, this dude's still going nuts. So he's jumping on people's cars. I mean, he's being quite belligerent. And at one point, he jumps up on this woman's hood, and when she refuses to give him money, he kicks the windshield. Not clear how much damage is done to the windshield. Just that he kicks the windshield.
It says he
kicked in the windshield. So now maybe he has access to. I mean, I don't know. Kicks in the windshield. So now you in a different car, maybe a step or so behind in line behind the kicked in windshield, decide it's time to take some action. Finally, your whole life you've been waiting to use that gun in your pants, and now today is your day. So you step out of the car, you draw your gun, you fire a warning shot off in the air, and probably say something like, "Go away!" I don't know, get off the car. And shocker, warning shot does nothing. Dude does not give a crap that you have a gun or that you fired a warning shot. Doesn't even concern him even a little bit. So he continues doing crazy, dumb, wild things. And at some point, it's determined, you know what, we're gonna have to shoot this dude. And so you shoot him in the leg on purpose. Unclear, or was it just that's your bad shot? We don't know.
So this is really interesting, and that's what where I found this story really intriguing is, one, it specifically tells us that the woman that was in line behind the vehicle, I guess, that got the windshield kicked in, she's the one that pulled a gun and fired. It says specifically fired it in the air. Hence, that's basically what landed this in the what not to do story category.
No, it wasn't the woman whose windshield got kicked in.
I didn't say that. I said the woman in the vehicle behind.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
of the vehicle.
I'm sorry, I misheard.
Fired the shot in the air. Okay, this is an ABQ. I mean, it's a fairly populous city. Bullets go up, they come down.
Not ideal.
Warning shots, we're not advocates of, and we are especially not advocates of warning shots in the air, because you are accountable for every bullet you fire, and there is very little accountability for where a bullet that's fired into the air is going to land. So that's a problem. That's a big, big, big problem that this woman considers that to be an acceptable, you know.
It doesn't say the shooter's a woman.
Yeah, the woman, a person in the line. Oh, I see. Behind the
It's just a
woman,
person.
behind. I saw there for a second. The woman pulled a gun.
Yeah,
You got to read that whole phrase.
yeah.
So we don't. Yeah, but here's what's interesting too, and I don't think you covered this quite as in detail as I would have. As far as it says, when that did not work, he approached another customer. That person shot the suspect in the leg. It seems to imply another
Interesting.
person is also armed.
Yeah, we have an English grammar concern here
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
it's not clear if the same person who fired the warning shot also shot the guy in the leg. Though that's how I initially read it.
Which I think you could interpret it that
Let me
way.
read the paragraph out
Yeah.
loud so everybody can interpret for themselves. Bad guy jumped on the hood of a woman's vehicle, and when she wouldn't give him any money, he kicked in her windshield. A person in line behind the woman pulled a gun and fired it into the air to scare bad guy away. When that did not work and bad guy approached another customer, that person shot the suspect in the leg. So that person being the other customer it was approached, or that person being the original warning shooter. We don't know.
This is where we usually make fun of modern journalism a little bit
Yeah,
because we read
struggle
stories
bus.
all the time that leave us just wondering, like, what the heck is going on here?
Either way, there's some interesting factors here. You talked about warning shots.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about accuracy. So I applaud the attitude and desire to say, hey, if I'm going to intervene in an incident, I'd like to not do more damage to the human target than I have to.
Mhm.
I think that's a noble perspective, and I hear that from students often. Like, well, can I just shoot him in the leg or something like that? And we don't know. It's unclear here if the intent was to shoot in the leg or if that that's what got shot.
Mhm.
I mean, it could just be someone who's not very accurate shooting.
It,
We don't know. Yeah.
either way, like it's an indicator of it may be different things that led to the shot in the leg, but they're both not good because in one
No.
case it's a poor decision. I mean, you could debate, I suppose, that that's a poor decision. We would generally say that's not advisable to like intentionally be like, well, I'm going to shoot you in the leg because why? Why would you do that?
I mean, if okay, so I would summarize it this way. Maybe this
Yeah.
is like the core, like higher point. Why are we using a gun?
Yep.
Because nothing in the story that I'm reading suggests that a gun is an appropriate response. Now, when the windshield got kicked in, if there was a point in this narrative that we have where a firearm might have been an appropriate response, that would be the closest we got. Because at this point now, the bad guy has access to get into the car, presumably if the windshield is kicked in, and do some damage. But at the point a bad guy standing on hood has kicked in windshield and is standing there. I would, like it's hard. It'd be hard for me if I was in the other car to justify like, I gotta shoot that dude. Like I think that's tough sell on the use of deadly force. And certainly when he jumps off that hood and approaches another customer, I would be wondering like, what is he doing that would suggest that we need to use a gun, especially if that other customer is presumably inside of a car. I don't see anything in the narrative that to me suggests the gun is an appropriate response. And I think what happens is when all we have is a gun as our only method of response, that's what leads to a person justifying in their mind, I'll fire off a warning shot. I'll shoot him in the leg. I'll do these lesser than lethal things because, in my own brain or heart or mind, I know that deadly force is not justified. So I'm going to take these less lethal steps, albeit with my gun, to try and de-escalate the situation. And that's what we just cannot endorse, and neither does the law support.
I'm glad you backed us up on that because that was, yes, well said in that regard. We don't know exactly all the facts here because we already identified that reporting alone is, leaving something to be desired. So there may have been some justification for the gun, coming into the picture. But I agree, like if all we have to work with here is dude is on car kicking a windshield, that is a perfect time for somebody to approach and hit him with some OC spray.
Sure. Yeah.
know?
Or to drive off with the car that he's standing on top of so he falls to
Now
the ground.
we do have, the fact that he did punch somebody in the face. which, depending on who that victim is, could be potential. It has the potential for approaching, lethal
Yeah, but
force.
but now we have imminence
But
issues because that would
yeah,
presumably that had happened and
well,
that was resolved and those people had left and
it's evidence of the
intent.
danger that this man
Sure. But he needs to be
presents.
posing danger
Hmm.
in the moment
Yeah.
that the
Well,
response
he
is
he
used.
did approach a customer. We just don't know what that looked like. It just says approached another customer.
Yeah, yeah.
So we
And
just
we don't know
don't.
who the customer is, right?
Yeah.
We lack anything that would justify the use of a gun.
Yeah. So there's that point, and that's very, very valid here. The other thing that I was going to touch on is that it's okay. If we make the determination that yes, deadly force is justified, meaning a gun is drawn and introduced into the equation, then it's justified, and a warning shot is pointless at that point.
Yeah.
And often I mean, sometimes they work, but in this case, it did not. I mean, this guy is clearly not making rational decisions. So obviously the warning shot didn't work, and then he gets shot in the leg. And so what my point there was that's either an intentional decision to shoot in the leg because somehow that's better than, it's better to shoot to wound than to potentially kill them. But the flaw in that logic is shooting anybody anywhere has the potential for killing them, especially in a leg where you have, one of the largest arteries in your body. So that's never, that's a crapshoot. The other half of
Yeah.
that is, okay, maybe it was not intentional. Well, then the problem there is that their skill sucks.
Yeah, learn to shoot. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're aiming
Yeah.
here, but you hit down there. Like
Yeah.
that's also a problem. And that was my point.
And from a legal perspective, there's no world where any judge, any jury, any prosecutor ever will say, "Oh, you intended to shoot him in the leg, then in that case, this is not not deadly force."
Yeah, you're off
You
the
know,
hook.
you're off. If your motive was just to injure somebody, then we're
Right.
good. Like when the gun comes out, for all purposes of the law, you're using deadly force.
Right. Anyway, that's quite a story, and that's why we brought it to you.
Bonkers. Call 911. Find different ATM.
Right.
That's where I'm at.
We have another story here in our What Not to Do segment. Title of it is Robbers Shoot Woman. Boyfriend Returns Fire in Philadelphia's Port Richmond section. This was reported on May 7th, so a few weeks ago in the Philadelphia area.
It's bonkers.
This one is also bonkers. I mean, okay, it starts out as a robbery. It's on the street. It actually talks about how a 27-year-old man and his 26-year-old girlfriend were walking after they had just parked. So I don't know where they're going, but they have just gotten out of a parked vehicle and they're walking someplace.
It's 10 p.m. at night.
Relevant. Yeah, it's late, it's dark. Two men approach them and hold them at gunpoint. So, all right, a lethal weapon is introduced on the part of the bad guys here. And it says here, these words are key, but the victims didn't back down. And it goes on to say that the boyfriend got into a fight with the men. And when the girlfriend intervened, one of the suspects shot her in the leg. Okay, so this is the first reason why this is in the What Not to Do segment, because you're approached by two robbers. They are very obviously armed with a gun. It specifically says that. So a gun is introduced, it's in your face or whatever, right? You have a couple of courses of action. You can play the victim and just say, hey, okay, like whatever, dudes, like do what you got to do. And I mean,
Here's the money. Here's the thing.
what
Here's the whatever.
exactly. And sometimes that works out, okay, but sometimes it doesn't. We certainly have documented instances where even after a victim hands over the requested items, that they then get shot. The one that always comes to mind, Jacob, is the convenience store clerk. I think it was in Mississippi, where after like empties the cash register drawer, the robber he's got him down on the ground, and he just walks over and shoots him point blank. And when he later explains his actions, he said he just wanted to know what it felt like to kill somebody that day.
Yeah,
and
it
so
happens.
So my point is like, you think, okay, if I just comply, like everything will be fine and we'll get out of this just fine. That is an option. It's an option that doesn't always go the way people think. The other option is, if you have the opportunity to, and you are carrying a defensive tool like a gun, if I have the opportunity, the timing is right, I defend myself, right?
Deploy.
In this case, instead, it sounds like they start fighting with the robbers physically. That's generally not the unless you don't have any other option, you don't have a weapon, that's generally not the course of action I
Yeah,
advise.
we don't know how to escalate it. What we do know, what hasn't been said yet, is that the good guy who's fighting with the bad guys, he is armed. In case,
He is.
so
We don't know
this
that
is
yet, but
this yeah, you're the option you're providing is not hypothetical. Like in this specific circumstance, he did have all these options because he was armed, and so we don't know how necessarily that escalator got physical. But the sense that you get based on the narrative that's given by the journalist, by the reporter, is this sense of like they wouldn't comply, they were pushing back, like no way, no how, and it's interesting because I imagine it's like a 2-on-1 fight. We got two bad guys fighting with one good guy, and then the girlfriend's like, "Well, this like I'm going to help out somehow. I'm going to
she
do
gets
my
involved.
part."
Yeah.
We don't know how she gets involved. Just that she gets involved, and then when she does, one of the bad guys is like, "Not today,"
She gets
pops
shot.
her. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like that's what's crazy about this is the boyfriend, it just says got into a fight. So he begins to fight with the men. And essentially that chosen course of action leads to the girlfriend getting shot.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, it looks like she's going to survive, but that is incredibly fortunate. Okay, it could have gone much worse that way, but the story continues. So it says that the men then pistol whipped, presumably the couple. Yeah, it says, and then stole $1,000 in cash from the couple. I don't know who carries $1,000 on them these days, but I certainly
would
don't.
love to carry $1,000. Like I'm on board with the plan.
I know I don't
Just
have
give
that.
me the money. But yeah, I think the point, like, the bad guys win. Like that's how this narrative
Yep.
goes. Whatever the fight thing is, maybe it's when you see your girlfriend get shot, you sort of like, oh, okay, like
Crap.
fight
This is
over.
real.
You guys like
Yep.
it's cool. Take the cash.
Yep.
Maybe that's how that goes down.
And then they get pistol whipped too.
Yeah, bang
Right.
bang, smack smack.
But the story continues. As the suspects were leaving in their getaway car, the boyfriend, and it clarifies in the news article, who was licensed to carry, presumably concealed, I don't know what other license it would be, pulled out his own gun and fires off 16 shots at the car.
16.
At the car, it specifically says.
16. I'm just going to go out on a limb and suggest that I find it likely that's every shot or every round that was in the gun. He unloaded the gun.
Right.
16 is a rather interesting, unique number. Likely is, there's a lot of guns out there that carry 15 plus 1.
Yep.
So I'm just kind of jumping to the conclusion that probably he unloaded the gun.
Now, it does not say that the boyfriend or anybody, on the victim side of things is facing charges. Good for them. The girlfriend that was shot was in surgery, but seems to be okay, and the boyfriend, it says, is doing okay. And then police are looking for the vehicle and the suspects.
Yeah, maybe a gray Buick.
Okay, so as far as that's concerned, in the end, all appears to work out okay for the victims in this case.
Yeah, they're down $1,000,
but it could have gone a totally different way right from the get-go.
Well, could have been charged. Yeah.
I mean we've certainly seen instances of that where someone is charged for shooting at a fleeing vehicle, at a fleeing criminal, especially if one of those rounds misses and strikes another innocent person, a bystander, somebody that's in their home. And here's the danger of shooting at vehicles too, is, I mean, besides the legal, potential legal problem there, but it's also that vehicle has got a lot of hard surfaces the bullet could glance off of, and then it could go anywhere. And so it's really a problematic situation from an accountability standpoint that could get you in big, big, big trouble. And so that's why this is in the what not to do category today.
Yeah, I think that person, the boyfriend came into the situation with potential advantage, had a gun.
Yep.
But however went down, it did not go well. And I think some poor decisions were probably made based on the info we have. Certainly shooting at the fleeing vehicle was a poor decision.
Right. Yep. We got one more story here. This one's a little bit non-traditional for the podcast, but I came across it and I was like, oh man, like I felt like this was an appropriate forum nonetheless to discuss it in. This is also out of New Mexico. We just had a story a moment ago from Albuquerque. I don't know if this was ABQ specifically or not, but
Mm.
it's New Mexico. Anyway, what it is an officer-involved situation, and not one where somebody is shot or anything like that in defense, but some non-lethal is used, and the circumstances of the story are really unique. Um, what it is there's two young boys, ages 7 and 9. Okay, a call comes into police because apparently someone sees these boys playing with this gun. And it is a live gun. It says he even says in the story more than once that it's a fully loaded gun. These 7 and 9-year-old boys are passing it back and forth. They're waving it around. They're playing with this live gun. Police respond, and while maybe there's not necessarily an intent or a clear intent that these young boys are intend to shoot or use it against these officers, a few times it does say that they point it in the direction of the officers.
They're certainly not compliant
They are not.
with the officer's requests over and over and over and over
Yes.
again to put the gun down, to drop the gun, come here, let me talk to you. Like this almost what seems like an extraordinary amount of patience on the side of the officers to try and give commands and make requests of these boys are all unheeded.
Yeah, there's even they have like a drone in the air at one point too, just kind of monitoring these boys and trying to get intel on what exactly is going on. Here's a screenshot where it shows one of them's got clearly his finger inside the trigger guard. I mean, at any time shots could have been fired from this gun, right? um here's I mean, paint this picture, okay? This really struck me, Jacob, because it says these 7 and 9-year-old boys are wearing Minecraft and Star Wars pajamas. I have a 7-year-old son, and a 10-year-old son is just a little bit older than 9.
Do they like Minecraft and Star Wars?
And they both have Minecraft and Star Wars pajamas.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
like, I'm just like, oh, like, what is going on here? I mean, why do these boys have a gun? That's the first question. Why are they also seemingly defying the police? I don't think my boys would do that. I think they'd be like, "Oh man, those are cops! Like, we're in trouble." Like they would be like freaking out. But these boys don't seem to be phased at all. When you read further along in the story, you find out. I mean, this is a home police have been called to at least 50 times prior to this incident. This is a troubled home,
Yeah,
and that
it's a
like
mess.
breaks my heart. Like reading about this, because I mean, this is a home and a household where there's clearly a lack of supervision, clearly a lack of care for the proper storage of firearms, and clearly issues with authority and respect and just basic decent human principles being taught to these children, because of the way this went down. In the end, it was resolved. As of the writing of this article, no charges have been filed against the children or their parent. I find that remarkable. I mean, not
See if
against the
that
children.
lasts.
The
The article's interesting because the news source, by the way, is a British
yeah,
news source.
Daily
Yeah,
News,
so
daily.co.uk.
that's kind of interesting. But
Hmm.
it does. I mean, in case like the way this kind of gets resolved, as far as I can follow the narratives, like the officers fire some less lethal
They do.
rounds purposefully at the wall next to these boys.
Yeah.
I presume to kind of cause these boys to kind of snap out of the issue or to drop to the ground or in some way kind of force them to comply or allow the officers to approach. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The sheriff said this was learned behavior. He said, suggesting their actions in the video was not an innocent misunderstanding. That's one thing that's kind of sad to read. We know one side is going to say, lock them in jail. They're 7 and 9 years old. I told you before numerous times, I understand the frontal lobe. Interesting that he has that perspective to be like, these are kids that don't fully understand what they were doing, not fully accountable for their actions in this case.
They're doing what they've been taught.
I think the cops made the right call in that way. They seized the weapon, and it does say that the behavioral health unit and probably child protective services and whatnot are getting involved. Anyway, the what not to do here really was it really was about a reminder of how important it is that we properly store our firearms. It's unacceptable these young boys got a hold of this gun like this for a long enough time for them to be, out and about playing around with it like they were. Both of them are so fortunate to have not accidentally shot one another
Oh,
or
that no
or
one was shot is
themselves
remarkable.
or
Yeah,
anybody else at
yeah.
all. Exactly.
I mean, it just takes one cop who just is not is a little bit unconcerned about the outcome of these boys to say, "Oh,
Yeah.
that
I
kid just pointed a gun at me. I'm gonna put a bullet in him."
I give them props for using restraint. I mean, this
Yeah,
apparently went on for quite a while as
a
they
long
tried
time.
to negotiate with these underage terrorists.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I think the other key here, I think it's really easy to hear a story like this and say that's not my family, right? Like, rather you have kids this age, you just said it's really easy to be like, oh, that would never happen in my house. Like, my kids have better respect, or we secure the guns, or whatever thing. But I think it's a good reminder, just kind of re talk to children about these kinds of situations, and give them an opportunity to revisit these things. When kids are under a high amount of stress, or there's a lot of stimulus that tends to scramble the brain a bit, and so repetition and having these conversations over and over again goes a long way.
yeah. Yeah. Appreciate those of you watching live and offering some comments. Paul said he saw part of that video last week. There is some body cam footage and there's the drone footage as well. And then Paul said he believed to recover the weapon, they used a flashbang eventually to distract them and then move in. Yes, that sounds about right. But anyway, yeah, quite a story and an incident, and kudos to those cops, I think, for again using restraint and doing everything in their power to avoid what could have been a much more unfortunate outcome. It reminds me, Jacob, of it was actually a Adams County deputy here in the Colorado Front Range area when I went through my post instructor school. I can't remember if it was the handgun course or the patrol rifle course I went through, but I remember him sharing a story of encountering a young boy. I don't remember the exact age. I want to say maybe 10 or 11, and he was armed with a sword.
Hmm.
It was his mother that called on him because he had the sword and he was waving it about and threatening family members, and so Adams County deputies responded, and one of my instructors was one of those that responded, and it's like, hey, I'm faced with this little boy who has a sword.
Yeah,
And he made this very difficult call. I mean, like that's a lethal weapon, and he was waving it about, and he just waited for the right moment to just rush in and take control of that boy's arms and hands, and ultimately the sword, and grab him and wrestle that away from him, and bring that to a resolution. He's like, I could, like legally, I could have shot him.
yeah. It would have been.
You know
It
what I
probably would
mean?
have been considered a
He's like,
valid shoot. Yeah,
but would that have been what's right for me? He's like, I would have struggled living with
couldn't
myself,
get there. Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
it's also a good reminder for us that, folks, I mean, bad guys come in various shapes and sizes and ages,
Sure.
and we see quite a few stories. There's probably some more here we're going to cover today that involve juvenile criminals, and you know, y- yeah, do the best you can, but understand that some of these youngins can kill you.
Yeah, and will.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, sure.
Next story. This takes us out of our what not to do stories. Now we're into the justified safe stories. Out of Evansville, Indiana, suspect shot and killed during Evansville break-in. Two other suspects on the run.
Not a lot of detail here,
No.
but presumably, what you get kind of from the narrative is that you have three bad guys who collectively break into a home, and in the course of that home invasion, the homeowner uh, is armed, and opens fire up and fatally wounds one of the three intruders. The other two make it out
Yep.
and run off and are at large.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of details, so not a whole lot of analysis to do here. I think the one reason why I wanted to include this story today, though, was to make a point about how people generally have a misunderstanding about castle doctrine law,
Yeah, sheriff does a great
including
job here.
including law enforcement. He says we are yeah, exactly. This is it's a public information officer of the Evansville Police Department. He says we are a castle doctrine state, so you are allowed to use that kind of force to protect your home.
But then he goes on to say something that actually does have some intelligence to it.
Yes. But that's part of the investigation to determine if that standard was met. So the investigation is still very brand new. Um,
Yeah, I like this as a detail. I'm glad you brought that up because
yeah.
it does have some fun things. One, I think that there's a misunderstanding about what castle doctrine is or isn't. But more relevantly, what I appreciate is that he says, well, we have to, we're still investigating to determine if the standard was met. So I think that he's thinking kind of more broadly about this idea of self-defense, and there are relevant details to determine. Like it's. I think what we hear a lot about stand your ground and castle doctrine ideas is a sense of like, well, this means that it's a free for all, that you can just shoot people basically anytime. Yeah, I think that the misunderstands this idea that like castle doctrine means that someone comes in your house, you can shoot them. Like that's all there is to it. And he kind of portrays this idea of like there's some standards that have to be met, like we got to investigate, and that's good, that's valid. But uh, castle doctrine would have has no real like it
It's not about
applies in no
defending the
way
home.
in this particular instance. Yeah, it's not applicable to this story.
Well, that's true. But I wanted to just point out that it's not about defending the home.
Well, it's about not having a duty to retreat when you're in your home.
Right.
Yeah.
But the defense that's used is not so much about the home being defended, it's
No.
about the persons that are in the home.
Right. Sure.
That to me is the flawed thinking that like I'm highlighting this because I see comments online from people that talk about how they have the right to defend their home. And I think that's inherently
Yeah.
flawed logic
I
and
agree.
understanding of the law. And I want people, our listeners especially, to understand that it's about defending the people in the home, not the home itself. The home is not what the law is concerned about protecting. It is your domain, and it has special, I guess, rights and privileges, you could say, to the fact that, as you pointed out, castle doctrine and how it's defined is that a person does not have to retreat from a threat inside their home. There's no presumption that they have to do that. They can defend themselves in the home. No duty to retreat. Do what they need to do to protect themselves and their loved ones.
Yeah. In the vast majority of states, it's really an irrelevant question because most 39 states are stand your ground states. So there's no duty to retreat inside or
Period.
outside the home.
Yes.
It's
Right.
kind of like who cares?
Right.
So then you're left with this small number of states, 12 if we're including DC. We have a total universe of 51. Then
Right.
you're left with 12 states that do have a duty to retreat outside the home. But
Right.
all 12 of those states do have a castle doctrine law that means that while you do have a duty to retreat if safely able outside the home, you don't have that same duty, that same necessity inside the home. So
Yep.
the castle doctrine is basically like a stand your ground inside the home, only needed or applicable in a state where you would not have a stand your ground option outside the home.
Right.
So the whole
Yes.
thing is sort of like, well, how like it's probably not relevant here. It's
Right.
certainly not relevant. There's not a place in this country where you have an obligation to retreat when safely able inside your
Inside your
home.
home. Yeah.
And so I
So you
don't
could.
remember this state specifically if they are a stand your ground or a duty to retreat state. And so maybe he's right in saying that, hey, we're a castle ground law state, so you don't have a duty to retreat. But I don't know how that would apply to this instance. It seems like it's not applicable. But I appreciate your point, which is that the greater higher level concern or issue is that some people are under the impression that the home as a location is defendable. And if that were the case, then we could set up booby traps and kill people who enter the home and we're not there. But that's not the case. It's the humans in the home that are defendable.
Right.
And so
Right.
I appreciate that distinction.
And I think people latch on to terms like castle doctrine and stand your ground and sort of like almost take it to mean like it's this license to that you can just do whatever,
Well, and I think that we see that when you have reporters and cops who almost use the phrase to describe that, it only furthers that misconception.
Yeah. And that was kind of that's what I was getting
We've
at.
seen courts get this wrong, and appellate courts
Mhm.
have to fix it.
Mhm.
So it's not limited to random forums on the internet that misuse these phrases.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next story out of Alabama, Birmingham specifically. AL.com reports suspect shot critically injured in robbery outside of East Birmingham restaurant.
This is a weird one.
Yeah. Well, do you want to take the lead on it?
Sure.
Go for it.
Dude has AK-47, walks into restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
The first paragraph identifies this restaurant as a fast food restaurant. So in my brain, I'm picturing a McDonald's. So the guy with the AK-47 comes in. We'll call him the customer, and he gets into an argument with one of the employees. It would seem they know each other. That's my takeaway here. Is like, bad guy with gun comes in to argue with employee behind the counter, who turns out also has a gun.
I'm gonna put the brakes on you. You're actually talking about our next story.
Oh, am I
Let's go
getting
ahead
this one wrong?
But let's go ahead and talk about that. Yeah, we have two
Oh, okay.
two
So
restaurants.
I already started this one up, so I guess we have
Yeah,
to get
so
there.
so this one's actually out of South Carolina.
Florence County. Okay,
Yep,
okay.
yep.
I'm sorry.
Cookout
I'm
customer. It
sorry.
says this is the title of it, so folks want to look it up. Cookout customer employee arrested after Florence County shooting. Sheriff says that's the
Yeah,
title.
my bad. So
Go for it.
Cookout presumably is some sort of fast food restaurant in
Yep.
this area.
I've never been to one,
I've
but
never heard of
yeah,
it. Sure.
yep.
So yeah, okay. So we got customer with the AK-47 that comes in, presumably has a relationship, good or bad, with an employee who's working there, and the two of them start exchanging shots, suggesting that the employee also had a gun, was armed, etc. And they start, quote, arguing and then shooting at each other, and that a customer, so someone unrelated to the confrontation, was also shot and had to go to the hospital. So that's not good. And that's kind of all we get. It's not real clear on some of the outcome and kind of how this shakes out. We know that both of them are facing attempted murder and possession of a weapon during violent crime charges. But
Mhm.
so presumably at some point they just choose to stop shooting at each other, and cops show up and do their thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting about why both of these folks ended up being charged. Um, but what caught my eye with this was one, the choice of weapon by the initial instigator of all this. Right, he goes in with an AK-47. That's a little bit unusual. That's, I think, noteworthy in that, hey, these are sometimes the weapons of choices that you just never know. That might be what you're going up against, and you're outgunned if you're facing an AK-47 and you're carrying a Glock 43 or whatever,
Right.
right?
Sure.
But if that's your situation, that's what you better deal with, right? So figure it out. Um, and what's also remarkable, again, is the fact that, you know, this really seemingly began between just this guy and an employee of the restaurant. A customer got involved. That sometimes happens, that you have nothing to do with a situation. Now, it doesn't mean you have to get involved, but it might be the decision that you think is best to make, depending on, hey, you're stuck in there and you don't know what's going to happen next. And you don't know if he's just going to start randomly killing people, or
Right. I
I don't
mean,
know.
shots are ringing out in two different directions.
Yeah, you got shots going all sorts of ways. So um yeah, this is just a wild story. But the uh yeah, so I don't know if I have any more to say about that. I was
Yeah.
looking back through the
I did
story
just check
to
the cookout menu. Yeah,
mm.
it looks pretty good. It's a very significant burger menu, and then you have some barbecue options, some barbecue chicken. There's a brisket sandwich, and a pretty impressive, ice cream shake option menu. So maybe we need to check out a cookout.
All right, let's go back to Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay, yep, I got this one
So
up now, so I got it right.
So this one, a suspect says was critically injured when he tried to rob someone outside this East Birmingham restaurant. Happened about 9:30 p.m. Okay, so it's after dark, it's late. High probability, things happen when it's late and it's dark. Two men tried to rob another man. The robbery victim fired shots, striking at least one of the suspects. And that suspect that was struck was taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. It does appear he's stable, will probably pull through. Um, and so let's see here. The shooter left the scene. Okay, so he was being robbed, but he shot and connected with one of the
At
suspects,
least.
but he leaves the scene, probably making a best decision he felt like he could to be safe. But he then called 911, and I thought that was one thing I picked up on. Reading this, I was like,
Pretty unique.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is noteworthy in that he defends himself. He shoots one of the bad guys. He leaves the scene, but as soon as he's able, calls 911. I think that's wise. That's important. That's good.
Yep.
Like, way to go, dude.
And I think it's encouraged to. I would encourage
Yeah.
someone to leave the scene if in any way you don't feel safe. And in this case, if I got two attackers, it's unclear, by the way, if the attackers had guns or they were armed or what that confrontation looked like. But if I had two attackers and I feel compelled to act in self-defense, I draw my gun and I start shooting, and I get one of them. In fact, it suggests that maybe I got him in the face,
Yeah.
and the other one though runs off. I would be compelled to leave because I don't know if that dude's coming back
Yeah.
to shoot at me, stab
Well,
me, whatever. I just shot his buddy.
very fair point. I mean, we just talked about this story. This was internally about that army.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
jeez. Talk about a DGU. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, when that's a case where the bad guy did come back and
May-
shot again.
maybe
So
that should have been in the lineup
yeah, if
this
we have
week.
time, we'll talk about it.
Okay, maybe we'll
So
come back to
I
that.
think the point is like I think there's a high percentage of the time where it makes sense to leave a scene for your own safety, but then to immediately, like this guy did when he got somewhere safe, contact 911, say, hey, I was just involved in this deal. I left the scene, or because I was concerned. I thought it was unsafe. It was dangerous, whatever. But I'm the guy. Like I got all the info. Come help me. Come take care of me. Send an ambulance. All the things.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty interesting story there. This next one is out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. WDEF.com reports it's Channel 12 News there in Chattanooga area. Title of the story: Chattanooga teen gets shot by man he attempted to rob. Talk about juvenile criminals.
Yep. This is a Craigslist deal.
Yep. This was just something. I mean, I like a good deal.
Yeah.
You like a good deal.
Huge fan.
I've done a number of transactions over the years. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace,
whatever private classified thing.
Yep. It is good to make sure you're safe when you do these kinds of face-to-face transactions like this.
Yeah, dicey.
Safe location, time of day. I'm also reading in between the lines as best I can with the actual communications I have with people. If they don't sound intelligent, that is a factor. It's like if we can't use proper grammar and whatnot, I'm kind of like,
I don't know. I like a good deal, but I think a lot of this, we've talked about these before. It's been a little while, I think, since we had one of these.
Yeah.
And I think the takeaway is sort of, I think one like the big best practice here is meeting location, right? So hey, let's go meet in the parking lot at the police station.
Yep.
Is a very different kind of environment than some behind the gas station over on whatever dark alley. So and we don't know. It doesn't specify where they met.
We don't know that. But that's a very wise suggestion, and I think almost every police department that I'm aware of offers that. Like some actually have a specifically marked area in the parking lot at the police station for these kinds of face-to-face.
Right. So maybe has a dedicated camera.
Exactly.
That's recording. Kind of thing,
but at the very least, like I know police officers are not going to have a problem with, you showing up near their police station and doing a Facebook marketplace transaction.
Unless you're selling guns, that could be a problem.
Yeah,
I would discourage.
Or drugs.
Yeah,
That'd
drugs.
Be a problem too.
That's discouraged.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't set those up at the police station.
Yeah.
So,
but it's unclear. It just says there are 2 items for sale. But good guy shows up, and during the course of the confrontation, there's 2 bad guys. I think they're the buyers, and one of them shoves a gun in the good guy's face and makes a threat. Tells him to get out of the car. He hasn't exited the vehicle at this point. And so they basically at gunpoint force the good guy out of his car. Once he gets out, one of the bad guys gets in to his car, presumably to steal the car.
Yeah.
And that's when it seems shots break out.
Yeah, a lot of the times these types of situations are a robbery to take, the item itself that's being sold, or in the case of someone that's the buyer to rob and take their money that they've come with to make the purchase. But it could be entirely just a setup to get a person there that's unsuspecting to take their car, because then they're going to take this stolen car to go use in some other commission of a crime,
or all the above.
Exactly. A couple of things here that I thought were interesting details. It says that they demanded the victim to exit his vehicle. And I was thinking, wow, that is not how I would recommend doing a sale, because I don't like, okay, there's certain circumstances where it's like if I roll up to a place, a situation, it's like, oh, this doesn't seem right. I'm in my car. I'm getting out of there with my car.
Sure.
But when I'm gonna about to do the sale, the actual sale, I don't want to be trapped in my vehicle
Interesting. Okay, so I hadn't
because
thought of this, but I think it's a super valid point. Continue.
yeah, I mean, I to me that's more vulnerable. Um, you know, yeah. So and some of that's gonna be a little bit context dependent, but I mean, let me kind of give you a sense of how I would do a transaction like this. When I'm going to meet somebody, and I do try to choose, set up what I consider to be a safe place to meet. I've done police station, I've done other locations that I know the location. There are cameras, present, things of that nature, and I feel like it's a safe location, lots of witnesses and so forth. Um, when I try to keep as many of my own cards up my sleeve as possible, meaning that if I can get a description from them of when they're showing up, what their vehicle looks like,
Mm-hmm.
etc.,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll up there and without before advertising myself, like from a distance, I want to be able to observe and be like, oh, that's the car, that's probably them. And I'm already like scouting out the situation, scouting out the location, scouting out the person in the vehicle, and looking if there's anything suspicious, or out of place. Because if there is, I'm out of there. Um, I don't like being the one that's sitting there already ready to go. If anything, I want to show up to my own sale a little bit late because I want them to be there so that I have that advantage of sort of scouting out the location and the person that's involved. Um, and only after I feel like, okay, there's not them and another person that looks like might be involved, that might be a second person that, tries to surprise me from behind or from my blind side, that kind of thing. I'll finally pull up and but at that point I want to be out of my vehicle because that gives me, I feel, more options from a defensive standpoint. Unless I'm able to be in the car and like the car's running, but that doesn't always seem to, it depends on what's being transacted, I suppose. If it's a larger item, that might not work out so well. I have to get out at some point.
Yeah,
So
I
anyway,
think you got to be
there's just some
thoughtful
things to
about
think
those
about.
things. Yeah, I appreciate the idea that maybe the perception was, hey, staying in my car is the safest option for me. But it does in some ways. It gives you one option, which is drive away, but
Hmm.
it limits a bunch of other options. It makes you have to actually rather immobile
Hmm.
when you're sitting in a car. So versus
And
being able to
makes it
run and
difficult for
move.
me to see, blind spots from the
Sure,
vehicle and
sure.
all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what happened here, though. And the guy was fortunately able. I mean, it says they exchanged gunfire. He just happened to be the victor, meaning the victim in this case happened to be the victor, meaning that he happened to get out of this unscathed.
Hmm.
His bullets were the ones that found that one of the seven. It was a 17-year-old suspect that was shot in this case, and I guess all is well and right in the world.
Something. Yeah.
So, final story. We teased this at the beginning about a fired construction worker who this is a case of workplace violence. And you
Yes.
published the article on the nevada.concealedcarry.com subsite of ours. Armed citizen stops workplace shooting in North Las Vegas. Well, first of all, that's the problem. It's North Las Vegas.
You have worked on construction sites in
I
North
have worked on
Las
construction
Vegas,
sites in North Las
so
Vegas.
we'll give you a pass that you understand the context better than some. Um, yeah, this is a interesting one because the guy gets fired because of a violent encounter. So basically, it's in an argument with a coworker, and he grabs a knife and he threatens several people on the job site.
Yeah.
So I think appropriately so, the employer says, "You can't work here anymore. You're fired."
Yep.
And he uh, comes back a week later. And by the way, in the meantime, he has secured new employment with a new employer with a new job site on the other side of the metro.
What I want to know is why he didn't get arrested from the first, situation.
Uh,
But anyway.
yeah, well, don't know.
Mm.
But anyway, so he, despite having secured new employment, decides that what happened to him is just not okay. So he takes his rifle. I'm pretty sure it was a rifle, a specified rifle. Yes. And he goes to the old job site where he had been fired, and he fires off 15 rounds in the quote direction of the workers. Now, to be clear, not a single person gets shot. So this is not a situation where we're a traditional active shooter. we're walking up on people and getting headshots and putting a couple in for good measure. Like he's just spraying. He's just spraying ammo, and he sprays a total of 15 shots. Um, the someone caught the sound of it on a doorbell camera, which was turned into evidence, and I watched that. So you can't see anything on the doorbell camera, but you can hear kind of the nearby job site bang, bang, bang. These 15 shots, and they're kind of sporadic, but he's basically just spraying ammo. And there's some interesting ones here because what happens is, as he kind of he throws in the towel, he decides he's done, and he gets back in his car, in his truck, and that a quote, the way it's worded in the news story says he made a turn in his truck, at which point one of his former coworkers returned fire and shot him in the shoulder. So it's an interesting one because I think if the coworker had shot him while he was spraying ammo, that would have been very interesting. Like, hey, like we're stopping an active shooter. But the way I read it, and I checked several news stories to see if I could get additional sources. The way I read it is the guy was done shooting, and he was getting in his car to leave, and one of his previous coworkers had retrieved a gun and shot him.
Yeah. That's an interesting one because on the one hand, this has like a similarity to one of our what not to do stories of shooting
fleeing
at the vehicle.
Yeah.
But the interesting key thing here, I think, is we don't maybe know exactly what this looked like, but he made a turn in his truck. It's like, was he turning around or something to come back? And
is he reloading? Is he getting more ammo?
Right,
is he going to shoot us from the window of the truck? There's some context dependent things. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
I mean that's
super valid.
That's the point,
Unclear.
and so the coworker shoots and wounds him, and that ends the threat, and it's like, okay, I mean, way to go. This is workplace violence is a real thing, and it happens. People get really emotional about their jobs, their means of providing for a family. And actually, that's a curious thing here, is it says in an interview with police, the shooter he spoke about the stress he was under, including the pressures of supporting his family and caring for his children.
I thought that was an interesting detail too.
That is interesting, and that's just, I mean, it's
like he was immediately apologetic.
Yeah,
he's like, oh, I'm sorry, like I'm just under all this stress. Like I know I just shot at all these people, but I'm having a hard time right now.
Yeah, we don't know what his past criminal history or anything like that is, but it's not. It wouldn't be the first time that somebody with no criminal history just snaps, just because of the as he says, the pressure that he's under. It doesn't justify his actions. It doesn't make any of it right whatsoever.
No.
But sometimes people snap, and that's something that we have to kind of try to watch for and do our best. It's always something that can be tricky with needing to fire or let go employees, and that's something that needs to be handled with care and understanding, and also compassion. It would be kind of the other thing I would say. I don't know if that would necessarily make a difference here or not. He clearly, I mean, he set himself up for losing his own job. I mean, in the very beginning, that's what's kind of ironic about this is, okay, he was under pressure and stress. He had an altercation with a coworker, but that led him to picking up a knife and threatening people. Like, well, buddy, you kind of, I mean,
dug your own grave on that one.
And then you just made it worse by trying to kill people, by shooting at them. So, wild story.
He snapped.
Good job for reporting on that one, Jacob.
Yep.
Why don't we just touch out real quick? We don't have the link here handy, but I'll make sure we get it included in the show notes. But there was that story, as we mentioned,
NorthCarolina.concealcarry.com,
Army soldier, defending himself and others in quite a wild situation. And on the one hand, it starts out from his perspective, starts out as a more of a medical rescue, but then it turns into something else entirely.
It's all the things. Like so this guy's not on deployment. He's just home. He's at his apartment in Fayetteville, North Carolina, or something, somewhere near Fort Bragg. And I looked up the apartment complex. Looks like a pretty big apartment complex. And he's just, hanging out at home, and he hears gunfire. I visualize some dude playing Xbox, and he hears
playing Call of Duty.
He's probably playing.
Turns into real life Call of Duty.
Yeah. So here's gunshots, and I don't know if he has his gun on him or he has to retrieve the gun. Unclear. But he exits his apartment and he sees someone shooting at the group.
Yep.
At people out and about in the apartment complex. So he returns fire right then and there. I mean, so first and foremost, he's a shooter.
Yeah. Yep.
He fires at the bad guy. Now the bad guy drives off. I kind of perceived that the bad guy never exited his vehicle to begin with, that he was just shooting from the car. But anyway, he's got someone shooting back, and so bad guy hightails out of there. And the good guy asks, like, "Is anyone hurt? Hey, is anyone injured? Anybody injured?" And he's directed to a 14-year-old girl who's been shot in the lower back. And so he starts supplying aid. He's a trained medic. He's a trained combat medic. He's an Army medic. That's what it says. Stationed at Fort Bragg. So he
it is apparently Fort Bragg once again, or something like that, because it had been renamed Fort Liberty.
It's Fort Bragg now.
Yeah. But
we can't make it. We struggle with this stuff as a complex where people, if you're a big deal general, then we or somehow you're famous. One of the ways we show honor to you is we name a base after you. My dad served on what was the base when he was there? I think it was like Fort Warren or something. And now it's Fort Eisenhower.
Yeah,
which is ironic because even when my dad got out, Eisenhower was done. But anyway, so it's Fort Bragg, and so we're working on the 14-year-old girl, and he determines that he needs a chest seal, but he ain't got one. So, the various bystanders are, presumably helping him identify something to improvise a chest seal with, and he gets a plastic garbage bag, which this is an argument against the state law here in Colorado that has outlawed plastic garbage bags. How are we going to improvise chest seals with a paper grocery sack? It's ridiculous. So anyway, he somehow solicits, gets a plastic grocery bag and uses it to improvise a chest seal on this girl. But while he's working on this 14-year-old girl, the BG returns in his car and starts shooting again. And it specifies that our Army medic shields the 14-year-old girl he's working on, shields her body with his own, and draws his gun, so presumably he's got a holster on, and returns fire again to the BG. And the BG once again leaves, and then he goes back to working on the injured party. Yeah. So what I find most fascinating about the story is it's very rare we find an instance where someone's really like giving care under fire.
Yeah.
Like this is the kind of like hardcore crazy thing that we might train for that's very unlikely to be applied in a civilian context. But here's an example where someone, while trained to do this in the military, actually had to provide care under fire in a civilian context.
Yeah. And this was the link to the earlier story where the man ran away after shooting at his attackers, where I said, hey, there's a time and a place where, like, you want to get out of that situation because his friend may come back. And in this case, somebody, the perpetrator came back to dole out some more, street justice. What a hero this guy is. I mean, first, he didn't have to run to danger, but he did right from the get-go. He heard shots and he ran towards the fight. Now, I know many of us would be like, well, I mean, that's what we expect of our, U.S. Army soldiers. But he didn't have to.
No.
This was not, Iraq or Afghanistan, but he hears shots. He went running. He initially returned fire, and then he provided care, and then he returned fire again. I mean, and I love the detail that he shielded the wounded girl with his own body as he returned fire. Somebody needs to give this guy. Well, he got a medal first of all.
The highest distinguished medal that you can receive for things you do outside of your military deployment,
not involving conflict with an enemy.
Yes,
he received the prestigious Soldier's Medal.
Yeah,
he was awarded that. I also,
to be clear, this incident happened like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So the reason it's noteworthy, or we just wrote the article, is because he just
received the medal. Yeah. And it's like, man, how did we not hear about that sooner? I mean, what a great story.
It suggests to me that things like this happen all the time and we just don't get the details. And only because he got the award, he was interviewed and all the details kind of were published.
Story comes out.
Yeah.
Really, really remarkable story. So
he's a hero. I
think it was worth coming back to that and sharing that before we wrap up the podcast today. Folks, thanks for being here and being with us. Oh, there was a comment that came in, and I thought I didn't mention it, and it's something that I have done, not always able to do so, but Pollock 56th said, never go alone to a sale. That's good advice. So I would throw that out there right here at the end. Folks, again, our sponsors today were CCW Safe. CCWSafe.com is their website. Definitely encourage you to check them out. KSG Armory Holsters. You can go to ksgarmory.com, pick up your next holster. One of the reasons why that's a sponsor of today's episode is to give you the best chance of proper self-defense with your gun. You want to be carrying a quality holster, not only because it's safe, but also still allows you to get an effective draw from concealment, because our holsters are designed specifically to make sure you can actually use them how they're meant to be used. Have you bought holsters that were difficult to draw from?
Yes, many.
As have I. And I look at those, especially today, knowing what I know now, and go, what were these people thinking? What that tells me is,
if you're kneeling on the concrete, applying an improvised chest seal, and someone starts shooting at you with your back turned, you better darn well have the ability to get that gun into the fight quickly and then put it away and get back to work on the girl.
Yeah, there you go. ksgarmory.com. With that, let's wrap it up. A reminder to train right, train often, and train safe,
so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.